Everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
So y'all have fun, and if it ends up being longer than an hour, and Mariam needs to go pray, because y'all are actually into a good discussion, that's okay. I don't mind that. Mariam can go pray and come back, right? So I don't want it to be cut short. I want you all to get out what you got out. So it's no, I don't want it to be. Yeah, we're an hour in general, but doesn't have to be that. You can go as long as you need to go to cover what needs to be covered, or short for that matter. All right. Let's see. I'll let you know when it is up on Facebook. Bismillah. All right. I'll just start it. Share on page. Share on the Islamic Heritage Museum. Bismillah. All right, Bismillah, you're good.
We're good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to everyone. The American Islamic Heritage Museum Culture Series presents Behind the Writer, featuring Layla Poulus. Yay. And today, as our host, we have Miriam Sullivan. So before we start, I'm just going to do a quick bio of our host and of our guest. So for our host today, Juwaria, also known as Miriam A. Sullivan, is a licensed educator for over 13 years. She is a writer, storyteller, and mother from Western Massachusetts. Juwaria penned the first English urban Muslim fiction book in the US in 2006 before moving abroad to teach in Africa and the Gulf. Currently, she works at a community college, is a graduate fellow at Indiana University, and runs the nonprofit Muslim Girls Reads, Inc. Juwaria has a master's degree in writing and literature with honors from Regis University. Welcome, and thank you for being a host with me. All right, and so I'm gonna read the bio for Sister Layla Poulus. Layla Poulus is a cultural critic with a background in literary criticism specializing in romance. She has been published in peer-reviewed journals and presented a national conference about Muslim and interracial romance fiction, as well as racism, sexism, and the Black Muslim experience. She is the founder and managing editor of the NBA Muslims blog on Pathos and an organizer of the annual Black Muslim Authors Convention. Layla is a contributor to the online publications about Islam and Hijab and co-editor of the Black Muslim Reads anthology. Abdullah Poulus content edits for select authors, mentors, aspiring writers across all genres. So welcome to the show, and we're really excited to interview you today.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm just so honored to be here. Thank you for having me and allowing me to host my good dear friend. A lot of what we're going to be talking about, we've talked about so much. So I really had to dig, and I was still thinking, I'm just like, what haven't I asked her about? What haven't we talked about? Because we talk so much. Alhamdulillah, I've been privileged to work with her on many, many, many projects. And so it's very special to do this because I've never interviewed you.
No,
and you've interviewed me several
you.
times. I was going to say, you've interviewed me several times, several different platforms.
Yes.
I've never been in the hosting interviewer spot with you. So this is special. This is
Yeah,
this is
the
new.
seats are switched.
That's right. This is cutting edge, people. Oh, we've never done this before. So alhamdulillah, I hope it goes well. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Alhamdulillah. Okay, so Layla, we're gonna dig right into the beginning. I really want people to get an idea of Layla Abdullah Poulos and what you do and how you are doing it all. We're gonna talk about that. Um, Give me your
I think I
bio.
do it all. I drop a lot of balls.
Right, absolutely. What is your what's your pitch? What's your elevator pitch? What do you go, what's your run of the mill pitch when you introduce
The run of
yourselves?
the mill pitch that I have, I don't think I
Yeah,
have a run of the mill pitch. I'm not a run of the mill person.
I know.
When people see me, just like with Muslim women in general, especially Black Muslim women, there's so much that is fantastic about us that I don't think run of the mill can suit us, especially if we're out there doing things.
Yeah.
But I think basically my primary goal in the work that I do is to highlight the uniqueness and the distinctiveness of the Black and African American Muslim experiences, and through their writers. I think that's been the crux of a lot of my work, as well as highlighting Muslim women and especially Black Muslim women. I'm everybody's cheerleader.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we'll get into that. We will get into that. But what's your writing story? What led you to pick up the pen and write? Because I know when I first met you, you were doing some other stuff heavily.
Yes.
And we'll get into that later too. So what led you to pick up your pen?
I think you mean as a romance writer, or because I write so many different
things? Right. But just in writing, whatever you want to lead with that.
Well, as a writer, the one thing that I learned is that if you are able to craft words, the world is going to want you to do it, and do it in a lot of different ways. So I discovered early on, I started off really wanting to write a certain things, not fiction. I became a professional writer and a contributor to multiple online platforms that centered Muslims. And I also wrote, for peer-reviewed academic articles. And it kind of switched over because through my work in literary criticism, one of the things that I wanted to do was I wanted to do what Toni Morrison says: there's not a book, the book that you want to read is not there, then you write it, type of thing. And so one of the things that I longed for as a Muslim woman and as a woman who has a penchant for romance is to see more and more of myself and women like me being loved and cherished and the target of affection. And so I decided to write romance. I studied Muslim romance authors, and I decided, you know what, I think this is something that I want to do too. I think it is very important because writing something that the world sees is a way of conveying a lot of things. It impacts culture, and it impacts society, and it impacts the individual. So if you're able to do it, then you should definitely do it. And so with romance, one of the things that I noticed, especially in Muslim culture, is like this compartmentalization of love, affection, and faith, when Islamically, they are so intertwined with each other. Because this is a deen, this is a way of life. This is not a religion. It's not like this is my religion and then this is the rest of my life and the rest of me type of thing. So one of the things that I wanted to show was that the uniqueness of the layers of faith and sensuality and love and Blackness in my books. And so I started writing.
Mm-hmm.
I love that, because you just rolled right through my next question, but that's okay. We're going to keep rolling. Were you afraid? So you have the romance. I was going to say, why romance? But you already answered that. But were you afraid? Because you so many different things. But were you afraid to go into that? Because that was really like the last frontier. We've had Muslim authors worldwide, pick up their pen but in the American, and I would say Western side of the world, because there's romance in the global Muslim world, even on the scholarly side. There's been scholars who've written extensively about love and romance and how to act as a wife, how to act as a husband, but we haven't seen anything on this side of the world in fiction. So that was like the last frontier. Were you afraid of that?
Well, I think that what happened is that when Islam took a foothold here, at least in the United States. So let's kind of like honing in on the United States, because I've spoken to Muslim authors in places like Great Britain, and it's a different vibe and a different thing going on there. We're doing so. I think what happens is that when it started to take a foothold, and it was Black Muslims that were essential in Islam being seen as and considered an American faith system and here in the United States. So we solidified it here as a faith in the United States, but we received influences from other Muslim cultures overseas, which is fine. It's not a terrible thing. But I think that one thing that did occur is that a lot of the puritanical ideals that come from colonialism that kind of infiltrated into Muslim cultures, they were brought over here. And so things like love, faith, love, affection, libido, sexuality, sensuality was something that was considered very, very hush hush, something that you did not talk about, and you especially did not appreciate it within the context as ibadah and as something that is essential to your faith, to a person's faith. And so discussions about love and sex were very, very limited. And even when you were talking about writing fiction, so we had in my initial work in grad school, I discovered romance authors. They were mainly Black. Black Muslims and Black American Muslims were the ones that decided that they were going to go into that frontier and write about romance. And so it was something that where they received a lot of pushback. I saw all the pushback they received. And I had to think about if I write in this genre, and especially if there were certain things that I wanted to write, even among the Black Muslim romance authors, they had a set limit as to how they were going to portray sensual scenes and sensuality between a couple. And they very much went into what's called sweet romance type of arena. There was only one who included sex scenes, and that was Papacia Fazar. So when I read her work, I was kind of like, yeah, that's kind of what I want to do too.
Shout out to our girl Papacia. We love you, girl.
Yeah, but she didn't show her face for a long time, I'll tell you that. Because of the pushback, because there is a huge fear of sensuality and sexuality in a lot of Muslim culture that exists. And even so much so that it's like scholarship has a hard time with it, and which is amazing because there is this long-standing scholarship when it comes to erotology, Islamic erotology and sensuality. And I mean, some scholars wrote some pretty hot and heavy stuff. They didn't just write like the nonfiction academic type of thing. They wrote some pretty hot poetry because of they connected those things together. And so when I saw that if I write these things, there are definitely going to be people who have a problem with it. Am I ready to kind of get that pushback? I mean, there's people that exist in my own house that have a problem with it. So am I ready to do that? And so I decided that I was. And as I have explored it, I'm coming into my own as an author, because there's a spectrum that you can navigate in romance. So you can go really, really sweet and what's called clean was just like not even any kissing or anything like that, because the ultimate basis of romance is the love, the two people falling in love or staying in love. So all the other elements that you can include, there's a whole spectrum. So I've, over the past few years, I've started to navigate that and kind of coming into my own as an author. But yeah, even then, there's still people that I know are going to have problems with it because it's so scary to so many people.
And I think that's really interesting because as writers, we know that whenever we're writing, it's intentional, right? We sit down, whether you use like a plot, character chart, however, backward plotting, people do it different ways, but everything that goes on that paper is intentional, right? And bringing it over to the Prophet ﷺ, he said that, actions are judged by intentions and every man should have what he has intended, or woman. So in terms of your characters, you've been very intentional and you have explored lots of different sorts of pairings and characters, but mainly you are bringing forward and introducing and making space, creating space in the Muslim fiction canon for representation of Muslim women being loved.
Yeah.
Especially Black Muslim women experiencing falling in love, staying in love. How important is that, and why? And what's the intention, your intention behind that? So that's a two-part.
I think it's critical. I'm going to quote a very well-known Black Muslim woman, Swad, and she says, if you don't see yourself, you can't love yourself. When you are absorbing your culture, and we have layers of culture, we have like our Muslim culture, our non-Muslim culture, our African-American culture, if we're African-American, diaspora culture, if we're diaspora, and interaction of those cultures, it becomes very important that you get to see yourself. And if you don't see yourself, then it almost strips away your humanity, and it nullifies your heritage in a lot of ways. And it can be very detrimental. So when we're looking at, romance as a whole is something that has been done here in the United States, especially, has been dominated by white women. So that's what you see. You see this paradigm of the white female love interest. Okay. And then there was the advent of more diverse romance. It's still teeny tiny in comparison, but it's coming out and more people are seeing it, and more people are appreciating it, because if that's not who you are, then you cannot imagine yourself as being in that position of being loved and cherished. And I also think it's important because, oh God, don't get mad at me. Don't get mad at me. You know how I get sometimes. I think that unfortunately, so much of Muslim male culture has been stunted when it comes to romance and love and affection, which is completely anti-ethical to Islamic teachings, or to the way of the example of the Prophet ﷺ, who was a very sensual and loving husband. And so I think so much has been stunted because of that, many Muslim women can't imagine themselves as being loved and cherished outside a very set kind of stagnant way. And if that's not something that appeals to you as an individual woman, then instead it must be something wrong with you instead. So what romance gives readers an opportunity to do, and for me, when I write my Muslim female characters, I want them to have an opportunity to see the different ways that they can be loved and pursued, the different ways that they could be romanced by their male characters, and still be also seen as a partner, and not so much so as an object for the satisfaction of the male character just in and of itself, which a lot of Muslim culture teaches men. That's the purpose of Muslim women's existence.
And that's really interesting that you mentioned that, because, you know, being in the fiction category, we get different sort of pushback that we've all, you know, the good and the bad. Alhamdulillah. There's always the alhamdulillahs along with the, you know, astaghfirullah. And you take the good with the bad, and you're able to weigh it and absorb it and grow,
Yeah.
you know, because the bad feedback gives you a chance to grow too.
Well, you
Even if it's petty,
definitely
even the
can.
petty ones, you know, I
You
love the petty
can.
ones.
And I've gotten it different ways, because when I'm the majority of my audience is not Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've gotten pushback because my primary audience that I'm speaking to are Muslim women. I want everyone to read it and to enjoy it. But when I'm writing, that's who I'm thinking of connecting with essentially. And so one of the things that's important to me is the language, to make sure that our vernacular is represented in the books as well. And I've gotten pushback from non-Muslim readers, like, I don't want to look at a glossary. I don't feel like looking it up. And even some who just like, it's not steamy enough. And I'm like, well, you got to hold your horses, because so, the audience that I'm looking at, you know, first of all, for me as a writer, the romance is the main thing. So I include sensual scenes, but I don't write erotica. I don't write for the purpose of writing the sensual scenes. They're just an element that I use in the book. And it's been helpful. I mean, I've gotten feedback from Muslim women who have read my things and say that, like, you know, reading it reinvigorated their marriage. They wanted their husbands again, because there have been studies done that show that sensual content increases libido. And I wanted to show the sensual content in an Islamic context. So, you know, my characters, they make dua before everything. I try to not have, even though I address very real things that happen in Muslim communities, the sensual scenes are between married people. My Muslim characters are married in their sensual scenes. I have yet to write one where they're not married. As a matter of fact, I'm struggling with one book where it's, oh my God, the characters just so like, listen, this is our story though. And I'm just like, nah, dude, I can't do it.
Yeah, I know. I hate when they start talking and telling you so. You'd be like, shh.
Because there's real stuff.
Yeah.
There's real
Not
stuff
going
that you
there.
want to convey. There's real stuff that you want to convey as a writer.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the book that I just released, the Ramadan Nights season 2 book. Okay, we have a wonderful group of authors. Last year, we wrote books with a Ramadan theme. Okay, so like a kind of holiday romance theme. So we focused on Ramadan. And so we did it again this year. And we actually had more romance authors. And so my book just released yesterday, The Ex-Wife. And one of the issues that I wanted to address in that is that the main male character has tattoos all over his body, all over his chest and everything like that. And because he got them before he became Muslim, even though we know that there are people who are Muslim and they get them anyway. But he got them before they became Muslim. But he had to deal with a lot of bigotry as a new Muslim with this thing that so many Muslims take offense to. And so there are real things that you want to show and convey that's happening in the community, that's happening in the Muslim community, that's happening between couples, that's happening, you know, in your book, Tried and Tested. I just love that you actually dealt with domestic violence in a marriage and some of and how complex in the layers of that. And a lot of times you get that, oh, you're showing Muslims in a bad light. No, I'm showing people in a real light. I'm showing people in a real light. And that's what you want to do. And it becomes very hard because sometimes some of the stuff is just like, oh, wow. Yeah, no, I don't think I could go there. I can't go there, even though it may push the plot forward. even though it may be essential to the characterizations, do I, as a writer, am I comfortable with writing that? And is that what I want to convey to my readers? So I'm kind of like at a crossroads with a book. That's why I haven't released it yet.
Mhm. And that's really important. I mean, those are just ongoing things that as a writer or someone who is potentially thinking about starting to write, that you'll have to grapple with. You know, what is your intentions? What does growth look like for you? And so I'm gonna throw in some controversy here. We've had this conversation before. We don't always agree on things, and that's fine too.
Mm.
Are you a Muslim romance author, or are you a Muslim who writes romance? And is there a difference?
There's a difference.
Where's the line? Because people want you, once you get into this field, people want you to choose sizes.
No, I'm both, because if you think
Okay.
about authorship in and of itself, well, if you describe yourself as an author, you can be a lot of different types of, or you can embody a lot of different types of authorship. So I'm a romance author. I'm a Muslim romance author because here in the United States, it is nascent. It's something that's coming out, and I'm so happy that I'm a part of it. It coming out, and authors being starting to say, yeah, this is what I want to write. I want to portray. I'm Muslim. I want to portray Muslims too. Non-Muslims non-Muslim authors contacting me and saying, my character is Muslim. I want to be respectful. How can I portray this character? What are some of the best ways to portray this character and still be respectful? And so I'm a Muslim author, okay, but I'm a Muslim who writes romance too, because I write other things. So it's not only romance, and it's not only one type of romance that I write. I write non-Muslims as well. So, my first book, it had non-Muslim characters that were the main characters in it, because it was definitely about interracial love in a time where, and Black women getting pushback for dating outside of their race. And so I write that too. So I'm both. And I think as an author, you have to kind of be comfortable with that. People will, like you said, they will try to definitely categorize you and put you in a box, but they try to do that with everything. They try to do that with you as a Muslim. They try to do that with you as a Black woman, or as a Black person, as a Muslim. They try to put you in those boxes. Everyone's been trying to stuff me in some kind of box somewhere or other all my life. So you have to be comfortable with not letting people kind of stuff you in that box, because it's interesting, because one author, Nasheed Jackson, when I read his book, he had his book slated totally different. I was like, this is a romance, right? I had to, that's what it is. And so he became comfortable with that. He became comfortable with being.
I was going to say, he's totally embraced it now.
Yeah, he's totally embraced it.
He has totally embraced that.
And yet, that's not all that you have to write as an author. That's the thing. So, like, I may decide that I want to write something else other than romance. I may not. Just like with you write children's books, you write urban fiction. So there's no box that anyone can kind of like put you in. And so when you decide, it may be that I write as an author that's coming out. You may decide, I want to write a romance, and you write a romance. And then you decide, I want to write a sci-fi. You need a different pen name, but I'm just saying, as a writer, you're gonna write your sci-fi. You know what I mean? So it's never one thing with authorship. This is your art, this is your craft, and you're going to apply it in different ways, or with a singularity, with whatever singularity or diversity that you want.
I definitely can understand that. I've always been really focused on expanding, and being intentional.
I'm waiting for a romance from you, because we're tried and tested. I was like, she needs a romance. She needs to write a romance.
I don't know if that's in my future. Allah knows best. But, just really intentional about Muslim authorship and being clear about that, because as we know, it's in here in the West. it's such a marginalized in especially among Black American Muslims or Black Western Muslims, British, and all of those people. Go ahead, take your note.
So like, oh, I'm sorry. 6 kids and a husband, everybody's home.
We're gonna get there too. Absolutely. Alhamdulillah, that's what we do. About really being intentional, like, no, this is the lane I'm in. I actually just a couple of weeks ago, I did a workshop with the Daughters of Abraham, which is a Jewish book club. And alhamdulillah, you know, we were doing some writing and we were talking, and we actually went over the size of a mustard seed. And, you know, I wrote that almost 20 years ago, but it was very interesting because them as Jewish women, and we were comparing, contrasting, you know, our faith, our relationships, traditionalism versus modern issues, and seeing how that grows. And so they were saying that, you know, the issues that you're talking about are universal. So, you know, are you a Muslim author? Or are you just an author? And so, of course, you know, for me, it's 100% I'm in the lane I'm in. You know, I'm a Muslim author. And while life, you know, because we're human, Allah created mankind. We're all human. We're all having human experiences. That because I'm a Muslim, because I dress like this, doesn't mean I'm not a woman. And I think that's what you're doing, right? You're giving people an opportunity to not only see the humanity in Muslims, but also the woman.
Yeah.
Right? The womanness that we have. And I think that, you know, growing up, and I know Miriam, you probably, I'm bring you into this, you know, growing up, being Muslim, people ask you the craziest questions in your life. You know, I remember being, you know, in middle school, kids ask you, you take a bath in that?
Right.
You keep that on your head when you take a bath? You know, who can see your hair? You know what I mean?
That's the one.
Have you ever taken it off? You know, they ask you the silly, because they don't think it's like, you know, you're like some sort of figure, like some doll, you know, and they don't see the girl or the woman behind the clothing. And I got married very young in my teens. And so people were just like, you getting married? For what? For what?
Well, I think, and that's the other side of it too, because there's so much beauty in the whole idea of Muslims who want to navigate through their own desire to have a partner, to have sex, okay, to be loved, and to do, there's so much beauty in the way that we do it, okay? And a lot of times what we get from the rest of the world is this whole idea that it's strange, that it's odd, that it is dysfunctional. And so when I write, I try to show, I show the beauty, and even just like how very sensual it is, that moment of that first attraction to someone. That's something that is universal. Okay. But in the context of Muslim culture, for a lot of Muslims, it's like it can be a very different thing, because this is someone who, when you see them, you're going to see very limited parts of this person. And so how does that attraction burgeon and grow when it's very different than if it's just a matter of seeing the whole part of the person like that. The idea of not touching another person and getting to connect with them, okay, because that's what the courtship process is. You're learning about each other, you're starting to connect with each other, and feelings are gonna, whatever feelings that you have, they're either gonna fizzle out or they're gonna grow for that person, and the objective is marriage. That is so steamy and sensual, just wanting that person so badly. And no, you stay over there. You can't, you're not married yet. And so it's just like, but those are the feelings and emotions and the experiences that we have. And I want to show how, when I write, I try to show how beautiful that is. I have in one scene in a book where the main male character brings his love interest, they're courting for marriage, he brings her a thermos of coffee. And just watching her drink that coffee, by the time she took her first sip, he was like, why don't we get married this weekend? Because he has grown to want this person that much. You know, he has pursued her, and now he's like, he wants his woman. Okay. And so she's just like, oh, what? Okay. And so I want to show that it's just like, it's not a matter of throwing each other on the table in a one night stand and all of those things. I'm not saying that Muslims don't experience that. I'm saying that when we're talking about the ideals of romance, the connection between faith and love and romance and sensuality, you know, it's a very different process, and it is a very beautiful process. I mean, that first touch, that first kiss, everything is just so intense and so beautiful. And I think that it's important that we show that.
Absolutely. I wanted to go back to something you mentioned in regards to, you mentioned about the ibadah, the faith aspect of it in worship, and trying to bring that into your work. For so many young Muslims worldwide, I would say Muslim girls, there's a lack of preparedness for marriage. There's a lack of books out there on courtship. And I think that the romance genre serves a really good intention, not just intention, but purpose, right? For Muslims to read and to learn some things that they need to learn. However, the pushback always, whether you're a Muslim author or non-Muslim author, is that romance gives a false narrative. It sets people up for idealism that doesn't really exist wholeheartedly, fully in the real world. So what is I really want to know your stance on that. Do you feel like romance is fake? Like these romance authors are just, the whole Fabio, he's so beautiful and he's so gorgeous and he got all this money. He got 17 cars and 25 houses and
the rich man. Rich man. It always got to be a rich man. Well, not all my men are rich.
Well, wait a minute. That's struggle love.
Not all my men are rich, but the whole thing is that, yeah, it does set up ideals. What's wrong with setting up ideals? What's wrong with setting up ideals? I mean, when we look at our faith, we have ideal examples in the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and so many men fall short of that every single day. So this idea that you cannot have this when you're crafting this story, that you don't set up ideals so that people can aspire, something that people can aspire to, is somehow is disingenuous and mendacious. I think that's going a little far, because I think that we see ideals all the time, and that gives us something that we could try to become. So when I kind of don't, my characters are very imperfect. So, but ultimately, yeah, I set up ideals of ideally, this is what men should be doing for their women, and this is what women should be doing for their men, and these are the different ways that can happen, that you could come to this ultimate end. So for instance, it's, there's certain expectations that you may have as a woman. And so when I do that, I write that. So like my male characters, I very much look at the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the different things that he was to his women, to his family, and to his community. And so a lot of my male characters have a lot of those aspects of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So yeah, what's wrong with that? Why wouldn't I want to do that? Why would I want to do something else? Why would I want to do some kind of like trauma porn and make it look like, like we're just nothing. We're just nothing at all. And, I think also when it comes to something like romance, you develop your own taste and your own preferences as an individual. If you are, and you get influenced by the world around you, what you see, like how many, like if you're fortunate enough to be the type of person that says, like, well, I want to be like my parents, or I want to be like this person, I want to be like that person, or what they see like in media, that helps to develop your proclivities and your aversions when it comes to you as a romantic, sensual, and sexual individual. So I think it is necessary, pertinent, and essential that we offer Muslims an ideal to look at and to say, yeah, that's what I want when it comes to my faith. And when it comes to me as a sensual being, as a sexual being, it's not something that they're divergent and they're so separate from each other. It's something that I can have both of, or I have these feelings, they're very real feelings. I have these feelings. And so if I can portray a character that has certain feelings and a reader can connect to that, and they can see that, like, I'm not the only one. This is a valid feeling that I'm having. And I have choices of what I can do with those feelings. And ideally, Islamically, I'm going to navigate through it so that I please my Lord and Creator, because everything I do as a romantic, sensual, and sexual being directly impacts my relationship with him.
I think that's well said. Well said. How have you received any negativity from the Muslim? Let's just dive in and be real.
I have.
And what does it look like on the romance side? Because I know the type I get.
Because I went a little buck wild with one book, actually.
Well, I know one cover set people off, and I was just like, "Uh-oh,
what?
That's my
All
friend.
My covers?
Like, back off. That's my friend."
I know. There's a couple of covers that people have issues with. Okay, but I think the book that I went a little buck wild in one book, a novel, Trapped in Sin, and I got a lot of pushback, a lot of good feedback. Like you said, like that feedback can be helpful. People are just like, yeah, can you just step back and look at what you wrote for a second? Can you just hold on 1 second? Because I'm usually in your corner, but you went a little wild with this one. And so I had to kind of like think about that. But ultimately, like, I think that I've gotten negative reviews. People don't like the fact they're like, oh, well, Muslims shouldn't do this, Muslims shouldn't do that, Muslims shouldn't do this. I'm like, yeah, but they're doing it though. That's that they're doing it. And how the story that I tell shows them doing it and shows how they're navigating through it, going through it to try to develop their relationship with Allah and try to get on the right track type of thing. And how it is that sometimes they're stuck and where they are, or sometimes they overcome it and they prevail and they make better choices. We don't make good choices all the time. That's just the reality. And so I've definitely gotten bad. I've gotten negative pushback. But I have to say, I've gotten a lot more people who are just like, I read your book. I got a lot of
drop off that book. I read it on my porch, on the back porch.
I'm not gonna share it on my social media, but I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah, those are the funny ones you tell me about.
Yeah, it definitely is. The thing is that I mean, romance authors are Muslim romance authors are in a very unique position, because I say it over and over again. I guess it just needs to be said over and over again. I'm a cultural critic. I have a degree in literature, and I've read a plethora of books by Muslims, and I'm sorry, we're the only ones that people chastise. And I mean, there are books where Muslims are killing people. There's Muslims writing about murder, about incest, about magic, and all kinds of things. But it's like the romance authors, we're the ones that, everyone want to, oh, I can't believe you wrote about that. Wait a second. This person over here just killed somebody in their book. How is that okay? But me writing about two people having a scene where two people kiss or make love, that's the end all and be all. I mean, at least be consistent, okay? At least be consistent, but I think we definitely get the brunt of it. We absolutely do. But
for sure, because like I said, it's that frontier, or that last frontier,
yeah.
where people still feel apprehensive about it. And I think that's, like you said, rooted in some of the colonialism, some of the cultural things that have been imported into our communities, and different views on women
Yeah.
in Islam.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, women as sexual beings terrify the culture. And it terrifies men. And many women are trained to be terrified of it as well, which I think is a shame, because you lose so much if you are. And so that's what you're battling. It's people are more comfortable with someone reading about or seeing someone slit another person's throat than they are about a woman exploring herself as a sexual being. It's very, very scary. That's not something that's outside of Muslim culture too. It's like all over. They're scared.
For sure.
And so when you're portraying that agency, and God forbid autonomy, and God forbid that like she takes that agency, she makes everything her own, and God forbid that she goes and she's the one in the driver's seat and he's okay with that. That's just terrifying. It's just terrifying, because I think a lot of times, and I've had discussions with Habiba Kande, the author of A Taste of Honey, that explores Islamic erotology, and Women of Desire, that explores Muslim women's sexuality and sensuality. We've had these conversations, and it's just, there's an intense disregard, ambivalence, and fear of satisfying female sexual partners among a lot of men. They're trained to not think of it as something that they need to do, and also they're afraid that it's something that they can't do. So when you see someone that's kind of portraying all that, that becomes an issue, and that becomes a problem.
Well, but got to get help. People got to get help.
Well, it's out there and it's growing.
Knowledge in Islam, the knowledge. That's the part we go back to Islam and seeking knowledge.
Such a rich, the thing is, there's so much scholarship about it.
Right, for sure.
And there's so much literature about it. Like, what we're doing is not new in Islamic culture. We're reviving it, and we're making it culturally specific, because that's something that Islam does. You have the main Islamic culture, but you also can tailor it so that you can embrace and appreciate and respect and honor those aspects of your culture and your heritage that are conducive with it. So I think that becomes very important too. But we're doing it. We're doing this happening.
To pull in Maryam, and I don't know if you've ever read Muslim romance yet, but Layla is on, and so many others are on Amazon, wherever books are sold. And just another promo, you can go to your libraries and have them order books if it's not on your stacks, and that always is helpful to Muslim authors. But on the other side, because I'm an author, so I hear these different conversations. But what do you think when you hear those words together, Maryam? Muslim and romance. What comes to your mind? What are any issues or fears?
Or when I've heard it before, I'm thinking like, I'm not gonna read that. Like, that's probably gonna be really boring. Like, I'm not gonna read it, you know. I remember reading those type of books when I was a teenager, or a little bit maybe younger than a teenager. Um, Probably should not have been reading them at the age I was reading them. But I can say that for the most part, I was reading the more cheesy ones where it was very, you know, Lifetime movie network kind of, you know, books. Once I, you know, got tired of that, then I ended up evolving to, I guess, the Black authors. And that was just very you know, my poor soul was just very because I was just like, I don't understand, you know,
You
what's
like
going
Zane? You mean like
yeah,
Zane?
like all that, you know, the coldest winter ever and this and that. And it was just too much, you know. And I remember like taking the book to my, you know, my best friend who's only a year older than me, like, but what does this mean? And she's just like, are you kidding me? You know, it was very traumatizing. But I feel that had something like this been out then, you know, I think it would have been positive, especially for young girls who, like you said, who do get married young. If you're getting married young and you're already, you know, in this very closed type of community, you don't know anything about romance except what you see on TV. Like, that's it. Or unless you have a two-parent household, you know, if you have a two-parent household and you see it firsthand, then okay, like, oh, I see how my dad treats my mom. If you don't see that, you don't know. So then we're getting married young, and then we're just kind of like, oh, like what are we doing, you know? And then we're having to learn along the way. Um, I got married at 20, which in Muslim years was late, but by Western standards, it was like, oh my God, you know, like why would you do that, you know? Um, so yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to get into these books. What's interesting enough is that I have some of these books on my Kindle. I just haven't opened them yet. So I'm very excited. I'm very excited to read them.
Yeah. So Layla, building on that, if you had to put a warning label or what's your select reading age range for these books? Are you specifically writing for adults?
Yes.
Or, you know, what age? What age? Can
Yes.
16-year-olds crack it open? Because you see, 16-year-olds where I work, you know, they may have 2 kids already anyway. So,
Right.
and
Well,
that's the
see, that's
reality
the
of
thing,
what's
though.
happening
But
in
see,
our world. And they're not married, you know, in a lot of places. And it's not just in the urban areas. Let's not do that. It's also in some of these suburban
oh,
schools as well.
absolutely,
So I want to put that out there.
absolutely. But that's the thing, though. I think that society sends just like this duplicitous message. And I write for 18 and up, but I know just like me, when I started reading romances that when I was still in high school in 9th grade, and I came across my first romance, you know, there are certain realities that our kids are seeing, you know. And I think that one of the things that I have to kind of like beat up on my Muslim brothers and sisters, because when you think about the things that our kids are exposed to, okay, very few of us, I know that everyone wants to think that they've kept everything G and clean and without any like kind of those like outside influences and stuff like that, but it leaks in, it drips in. They're gonna get exposed to it. And so it's just like, I'm not saying a 14-year-old should read my romances. I'm not saying that. My romances are adults 18 and up. But if a 16-year-old person read, there's some of my romances, if a 16-year-old person read it, yeah, why not? There's nothing in my romances that isn't in the latest Academy Award winning movie, is what I'm saying. Okay. Or even in Malcolm X. And I remember they brought all those kids from the school to see that Malcolm X Spike Lee movie. Type of thing. So yeah, if it's a matter of, if you're a romance reader, if you're a young romance reader, I write romances and I write sensual scenes in those romances. And it's not my responsibility to keep my romances out of your kids' hands. It's yours.
Mm-hmm.
Just like everything else. It's yours. And it's not, it's not because my books are haram, but there's a such thing as age appropriateness. There's certain medications that you can't take at a certain age. Does that mean that the medication is haram? No, it's just that you can't take it at a certain age. There's content and situations in my books that are not appropriate for young people to be reading. It's perfectly appropriate for older people, adults, to be reading. I definitely write adult fiction. I write adult fiction and adult characters, and I because there's the Muslim literature is saturated with YA, new adults and children's books, which is wonderful. Not saying there's anything wrong with that. I think that it's wonderful, but there's very little, relatively little adult fiction. So I definitely write adult fiction. So 18 and up, definitely. And keep them out of your kids' hands. Like, put your book away. Put Trapped in Sin away, especially. Because it deals with real issues. You're dealing with you're dealing with people who are engrossed in haram behavior. They know it's wrong, and they're still trying to maintain their Islamic identity and their worship and their ibadah. So it's really complex issues that I deal with in some of my books. I mean, I have characters who actually do slit someone's throat, and then they wash up and then they go make salat afterwards, because they're trying their best to get out of a life that they're in. And we can find ourselves, we're human beings as Muslims, we can find ourselves in those situations. You can find yourselves in all kinds of situations that you're trying to get out of. I mean, it's disingenuous as someone who has had drunk people come to the mosque trying to make salat, to try to act like that. That's not a real part of a reality in Muslim culture. We're always trying to dress it up and try to make it seem like what it's not. And what we end up losing is people start to lose hope, because I'm not that perfect person. I am doing something I shouldn't do. I have no hope in Allah's mercy or anything like that. So if we as writers can show, like, no, these are imperfect human beings that are doing imperfect things, and they're navigating through it so that they can improve their relationship with the Lord, so can you too. Okay, why not be able to do that? Why does it always have to be dressed up? Because we're not.
Yeah, for sure. As we wind down, you've tackled a lot of stuff, stuff that I'm afraid to even tiptoe near. I do flashbacks. I don't even do a whole, I'm not even starting there. I'll just do a little flashback and be like, well, this is what happened. Let's move on. But you talked a lot. You have some books about interracial relationships. Mm-hmm. Why has that been important for you to discuss and to narrate about?
Well, I think it's because I'm in an interracial relationship.
I'm gonna say I know why, but
my husband's Puerto Rican and Greek, and very fair skinned, and he's white passing. And so, we've had to go through we've been married for over 30 years, and we've had to go through a lot of things. And so that influences my writing, especially my Muslim writing. The characters, there are certain things that I've experienced or I've seen other Black Muslim women in interracial relationships experience that I want to address. I have Black love too. I have book 4 in the Brothers-in-Law series. It's Brandon and Howard. They're Black Muslims, and but I wanted to show that. And also, it's really a burgeoning and hot subgenre in romance is interracial, and especially Black women, because more and more that's what Black women want to see. They want to see themselves, and I think that Muslim Black women want to see themselves as well. And so I show them. I just actually wrote my first book where the female lead is not Black for the first time. Wow. I don't think I'm gonna do it again though. I did it because readers got so vested in her. She was the secondary character in the first book. And so they got so vested in her, they wanted to know her story. They wanted her to have her happily ever after too. And I was like, okay, I'll give her happily ever after. Then I'm going back to my Black women.
Yeah, and it's interesting because in my first novel, almost 20 years ago, I wrote about a biracial um, lead character in not Tried and Tested, The Size of a Mustard Seed, so long ago. And I did get some interesting comments about that, like why do that? Is it, that attempt to otherize the experiences within the diaspora. But I have biracial children, and so that was my also me living, putting my own experiences in dealing with, interracial marriage, having biracial children as a Black woman, living overseas, having
It's a
in-laws and
lot.
things of that nature. It's so many different nuances that we don't see represented. And I say people always are big talking about, interracial relationships. Very few people have that experience, and we don't see it, and we don't talk about it. So I'm
and
like,
in Muslim
I know
culture,
you
they
wasn't
try
in
to
one.
idealize it. In Muslim, this is the thing. Also, in Muslim culture, they try to idealize it as the solution.
Yes. Tokenize. I say tokenize.
This is the reason why it's not. There's no racism in Islam, because look at this couple. And without even just appreciating what it is that couple had to go through to get together, and what they'll continue to have to go through. I mean, in one book, in Building on Broken Dreams, the male character is white, and the female lead, Miriam, is African American. And I have one scene, okay, because I've lived this scene. I know plenty of Black women, Muslim women who are married to non-Black Muslim men who have lived this scene where they go to a friend's house and he's treated very differently than she is. And she's like, I got to go. I want to go home now. Because she has to encounter anti-Blackness and racism, and he doesn't. And so that's just like a reality that you have to, that's one of the many things that you have to deal with when you're in an interracial relationship. And that's the fact, and the fact that the partner, if you're the non-Black husband, your Black Muslim partner is going to go through some stuff. And you may have never had an issue there, but when she roll up on the scene, is potentially something different. Definitely. And so it's just like
been there, done that.
Been there, done that type of thing. And I wanted to do it because I think that it's like you're speaking, I'm writing from my cultural perspective to my culture, from my experiences to people who are experiencing the same thing. It's not for someone, they could do it, but it's not, for me, it's not for someone to write that. It's for me to write that. So it's just like, if you're not Black, you can write Black characters. There's nothing wrong with writing Black characters. Go ahead, knock yourself out. You can't write the Black experience. That's
especially the Black Muslim experience.
Oh, you can't write the Black Muslim experience.
It's been tried in traditional.
I had one author,
and it's just always a fail.
I had horribly. One author, a very lovely author. I won't mention their name. They had a Black character in their book, a non-Black Muslim author wanted a Black character in her book. Okay, fine. And I read the book, and I was like, do you know that you reinforce stereotypes about Black women, their hair, criminalization of Black people and everything like that, and you mammified your Black female character for your main character? Do you realize that you did that, sis?
Wow.
Because you can't write the experience. Okay. And if you're a Black person reinforcing those stereotypes, that it means something totally different. Yeah. So it's just like, you cannot write that experience. I can't, I just wrote, when I write my interracial romances, The men are not Black, so I don't write them like Black men. And I don't write their experiences. I write what they experience with their love interest, not their cultural experience. You know, as Asian Americans, as European American. Well, I feel a little bit more comfortable with European Americans because it's all shoved down our throat. Everybody has to know that culture, back, left, right, up, down, backwards, and forward.
We're fluent.
Huh?
I said we're fluent in it.
We're fluent in it, exactly. And you know, I have Desi. They're always like from an American heritage, so they're Desi American, they're Asian American, like that, you know. And so I feel comfortable in doing that because I don't write their experiences. I write what they experience with their love interest, but I definitely write aspects of the Muslim American experience and the Black American experience and the European American Muslim experiences. Definitely I write about that because that's something that's just like real, and we have European culture shoved down our throat. Yeah, I definitely know a lot about European American culture. You can't help it. That's the way that it is. So I think that that's important. I think that you can write Muslim characters. You can't write the Muslim experience unless you're a Muslim. If you were once Muslim, it's going to be something totally different. That would be interesting because there's one New York Times bestselling author who is from a Muslim background. She's not Muslim. And she contacted me when she was writing her Muslim character. I was like, okay, well, just be careful that about how it is that you want to portray this character, because you are just like you as a black woman don't want these stereotypes and things reinforced. You don't want to do it. You don't want to do it to the characters. So you can definitely write a diverse amount of characters. You can't write their experiences, and please don't use them as props unless you want to purposely do so. I do so for white female characters. I'm very open and honest about it. I have some good ones. Don't get me wrong. I have some good ones, but I definitely have Karens. I definitely, because as a Black woman, I encounter that so much. Yeah. And it impacts me so much that no, I'm going to write this. This is what I encounter. I'll put that in there. Going to have that Karen, right? Her name is
how does it all boil down? Let's get to the tips and the tricks and the inspiration for up and coming authors and writers and dreamers who are looking to get into the field. I get so many emails from sisters and brothers now. I'm starting to get quite a few inquiries from brothers, like, I got this story, sis. And I love it. That's what we want, to see the genre continue to grow and to get its own life and its legs to underneath it. You're a mother, you're an author, you're an academic, you're a homeschooler. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. So how do you make time? What's your writing schedule like? Are you up at 1 a.m. like I am?
Usually my choice witching hour is 4 a.m. Around 4 a.m. And it depends on what I'm writing. I like to break it up, and I can't sit and write 2,000 words. It's not gonna happen. I've tried it. It's just not me. I'm not a NaNoWriMo type of writer either. I'm just not. And I think that those authors who are, that's great. I'm lucky with 1,000 words a day, which is interesting because Stephen King said something like 6 pages a day. So, which is like, more than 1,000 words, but I'm just like, that's it. That's all he writes is 6 pages a day, really? And so you have to form your own schedule of what you can do consistently. And you have to honor that if you want to get your story out, if you want to get your characters out. It takes dedication, and no one is going to help you get those words out You have got to do them yourself. Now, you may get help afterwards after you've crafted them and you're like, oh, can you check this out? Even then, that's kind of hard because if you the majority of writers that you would want to read your work are too busy writing themselves. So it's kind of hard to get them to read it, but you definitely have got to do it. And I think you've got to decide what it is that you want to write, what your story is, and look at your genre, because it may be that there's room for you to start small and then expand like that. And in some genres that it can be you can build your readership that way. There's like in the romance genre, shorter reads, you can build yourself as an author. You can build a readership on your shorter reads. There are plenty of authors I know that have done it. And if you are, and we're talking about fiction, right? If you decide that you want to write a novel, those things take time. And don't think that they don't. Those things take time. If you're talking about writing anything over 40,000 words, give yourself the time to write it. They take time to write, to edit, revise, and to edit. That's why, like big long books, it usually takes the author like a year. Like, you know, so authors like Stephen King, his longer books don't cut. You see, they're few and far between. He writes a lot of novellas, and there's a reason why. It's because those big chunks of work take a lot of work to do. And if you are not ready and comfortable as an author to write that at that vast level, then start off small. There's nothing wrong with starting off small, because you're getting your story to readers, and that's what they want. That's what readers want. And it doesn't matter if your book is 400 pages or 250 pages. As soon as the readers finish it, they're going to be looking for the next book anyway. It took you a year to write that 400-page book. It took them a day or two, 2 days, 3 days and they're like, okay, so a month after the release of that 400-page novel, they're looking for the next book from you. You know, so if you want to start off small, you can start off small. You want to commit to writing those words down, and don't feel like those words are not worth being put onto the screen or written down in paper. Write them. Just write them, and then you can go back and you can revise them any way that you want. And then you can seek the advice of other authors or your readers. You know, you get readers to kind of like read it and tell you what they like, what they don't like. Definitely. And for those people who are they're about to publish their first book, don't read the reviews if you love yourself. Don't read the reviews right away if you love yourself, and don't obsess over star ratings. There are plenty of books that have 4 stars that are selling like hotcakes, and 3.5 stars that are selling like hotcakes. What was the book? 50 Shades of Grey was 3.5 stars on Goodreads and Amazon. Okay. So plenty of books that have lower star ratings that, you know, become movies and shows and everything like that, if that's what you want to do. I don't want to do that because of what my characters do. I can't have 2 people actually doing that. But I got my limit. So don't read those reviews and move on to your next book. Once you publish that book, move on to your next book and get to know your readers.
Those are solid tips. Those are some solid tips. I would also add, you know, that there's a correlation between reading and writing. You should be reading in that genre, as you said. You know, it's going to be inspirational. You're going to see how good writers are crafting, and covering different techniques, and then you can go and practice that. So you read, you write, you write, you read. It all goes together. Get in the habit of doing that. And studying your genre. You got to study. You got to study the greats, you know.
You got to study what appeals to readers.
Right. You should know what the bestseller is.
Readers. What is it that's appealing to readers? And is that something that you want to write?
Right.
You know, and especially if you're niching yourself into a subgenre, Okay, so if you're talking about mystery, what kind of mystery is it that you want to write? What's
So
out
many.
there? What's appealing to readers? Is that something that you want to write? That you're definitely going to have to come at those crossroads and make those decisions, because there's a lot out there, and you want to decide as a writer how it is that you want to convey your messaging, because it may not be that, it may be, or it may not be the way that you want to convey your messaging. And
Sounds good.
if you're a
Sounds
unique
good.
writer and you're coming in, especially Muslim writers, I think if you're going into subgenres as a Muslim writer and you're centering Muslims, it's going to be very niche and very unique. And so readers will have to find you and start to gravitate towards you, type of thing. You know, Muslim romances are here are very specific types of things. I mean, even with my books, I'm like, meow, meow, you know, it's not as hot and steamy as what is going on in romance out there. It's not as erotic as what is going on in romance out there. So it's like, you have to decide, is that what you want to convey, and how you want to convey that. Your message, your story is what everybody else doing what you want to do. Like, do you want to, like right now in romance, the big thing is monster romance. Okay, so it's like monsters with all these appendages and stuff like that. And it's just like, okay, as a romance author, if I write something like that, I could probably make money. But as a romance author, is that something that I want to write?
Right.
You always have to kind of come to that decision.
Sounds good. Those are some really good tips. Well, we thank you and appreciate you, and we love you. And again, was an honor to interview you, and I did learn some new things. Alhamdulillah. Everybody go out. Layla has a new book. Go ahead and throw out and promote yourself.
Well, it's part of the Ramadan Nights series. So I want to kind of like blast out the whole series with all these wonderful authors this year. We did it last year. It's Muslim romance authors, and it's Saina Rice, Safi Ali, BF Queen, Sarah Allen, and Nikki Levette, and myself. And it's Nikki's first Muslim romance that she's publishing. And it's just wonderful. It's Muslim women who've written these romances. We try to get Nashidi, couldn't do it. Hopefully he can do it next year. We have Ramadan Nights again. It centers the month. And the theme is the month of Ramadan. So what is happening to the characters during that month? How is it that you're navigating through love and romance during the month of Ramadan, finding new love? It's some very interesting stories. My story, the ex-wife, is from a character from the previous Ramadan Nights book. She left her husband and her son because she was falling apart. She had postpartum depression and anxiety, and she was falling apart because her husband was not the best husband in the world. And so she left, and now she's back, and she's trying to reconnect with her son. That's not working out very well. And she meets this Muslim firefighter with all these tattoos all over. Well, he himself, he has an ex-fiance, because he became Muslim and he broke it off his engagement because he decided he wanted a Muslim family, a Muslim wife, and his ex-fiance not trying to hear that. So it's called The Ex-Wife. There's age gap romance with Safia Ali's The Last Chance. Her main character, Safira, she used to babysit this young Muslim boy, and he's not a boy anymore. And so she has to kind of decide, like, am I going to marry this guy? Because I'm like, no, you're a baby. He's like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not a boy, and I want you. So what we gonna do, sis? So it's it just showed like all these different layers and these interesting ways that Muslims are falling in love and staying in love. So Ramadan Nights, and most of them are sweet. I do have a sensual scene in it, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible. I have to do my readers justice. They like I say that people have sex, and so do my characters. So Ramadan nights, 99 cents. They're 99 cents each. And they're on Kindle Unlimited for Kindle Unlimited subscribers. And it focuses on faith, romance, love, and they're really good reads. They're fun reads.
We thank you. We hope you
Thank you.
enjoyed this program. Thank you for tuning in. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله
Assalamu alaikum.
وبركاته.
Wa alaikum salam.